Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And me and Jimmy are really excited to speak with you today about how you can get started embedding AI agents in your SOC. We have a few questions that we've discussed that we think would be helpful for all attendees to hear us walk through, but this is by design very much question-oriented. Again, we have some questions that what me and Jimmy have already decided to discuss, but really want to lean heavily on you all to ask us questions you may have, and Jimmy's excited to talk through them. So even if you showed up to this webinar without hearing Jimmy talk at all with some burning questions, no question is a bad question. Please get it going in the chat or provide in the Q&A, and we're excited to address it as we progress through the webinar. But just a little bit about me. My name is Alex Spiliotes, and I'm a director of product marketing at Red Canary. I've been here at Red Canary for about 3.5 years. Just before Red Canary, I worked at an industry analyst firm and then at a SIM vendor. So I've been on kind of the business side of security operations for a bit of time now. At Red Canary, my focus areas kind of shift, but right now I'm currently focused on how we use AI as part of our SOC, identity threat detection and response, and our data storage products and capabilities. And interestingly, AI agents can factor prominently into all those coverage areas for me. So again, really excited to be chatting with you chatting with you about this today. And now I'll kick it over to Jimmy, who can do a little bit of intro on himself.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you for coming to listen in, and as Alex said, excited to make this a very back and forth conversation with the folks in the audience. So I've been at Red Canary 3.5, almost 4 years, same as you, Alex. I lead our validation and data science efforts here within our engineering group at Red Canary, focusing a lot on agentic workflows and how we can harness, the power of these large language models to help make us better at what we do and ultimately protect our customers. Prior to this role, I led threat research here at Red Canary. And I also, prior to that, I was at Carbon Black for 6 years doing threat research and stuff over there. But I do have a career pretty much entirely in R&D, and I spent the early part of my career at MIT Lincoln Laboratory in the Cyber Systems Assessments Group, working on sort of national security, cyber-related problems, and really diving deep and immersing in just cybersecurity in general. So excited to bring, practical practitioner, defender, attacker approaches, but also talk more about the state-of-the-art AI innovations that are happening and how they complement, what everybody does here on this call.
Great. Thanks for the background, Jimmy. So to kick it off, Jimmy, why do you think security professionals should actually care about AI agents?
Yeah, I think that this is the number one question, right? To just take a step back without going right into there, one of the key things as a security analyst, or if you're in a role trying to support analysts, is you got to do these investigations, and you have to build these sort of standard operating procedures before technology is even part of it, right? And so as you start to outline your standard operating procedures, then you kind of come through and go, cool, what parts of this can I automate? How can I quickly bring to bear, high signal, low noise, and sort of sussing out threats, right? And so that's sort of what you do in security operations centers as a nutshell. You're taking a bunch of data in, you're trying to make smart decisions, and then, eradicate threats based on that. And so we have this new dimension now, right? These large language models came along, and, we use machine learning internally, which is your traditional classifiers, clustering, those sort of tools, and we use those. But when these large language models came along, it's like this entirely new toolbox got delivered to our doorstep with unlimited number of tools at our disposal to help kind of do security investigations. And so as a security professional, you're oftentimes trying to automate more things, get more efficient at what you do. And AI agents powered by these large language models open up entirely new automation criteria and capabilities. And so think about it, right? We're all here from the blog that Alex and I co-wrote, and the example and the thread that we pulled is an identity investigation, right? I wish I could see your hands, but I would ask how many folks in this audience have had to do identity investigations, and it's not something that's black or white, meaning like it's not like on an endpoint threat. I saw PowerShell do this really weird thing. Humans are very random. We work in a very distributed work environment, and things like VPNs allow us to show up in different places in the world really quickly. And so oftentimes the signal is really fuzzy there. And so you have to ask lots of stateful kind of investigation questions to accurately sort of say, hey, did Alex really log in from San Antonio or not, right? And so we thought that that was a great use case of showing off that AI agents, when you give them access to tooling, they are able to do certain parts of your investigation process that don't require critical thinking, that don't require that human touch, that reasoning, right? And so I'll gladly take the book smart LLM that knows how to write queries and query databases and summarize information for me and stack all of that up to build an investigative picture that a human can then take note on, right? And so I guess that kind of opens up the larger conversations, Alex, but I kind of wanted to start on one end and work my way over to actually answering the question.
Yeah, and I appreciate you doing that because I think it illustrates kind of a way we've approached using LLMs in general at Red Canary, which is not necessarily this is a cool, clearly powerful technology that we have to use right now. It's like, what's the work that we already do for our customers? What's the work that you don't need necessarily human reasoning or critical thinking to do? And what's the interplay between them where LLMs or agents can add a lot of leverage, right? So it's again, I like what you said, like taking work off our people's plates and just kind of making the whole our whole program more efficient.
Yeah.
Um, you got,
And
yeah,
I would
please
just
follow up.
I would just also add that, you know, security operations center work is not easy, right? Despite what you might see in marketing materials, and people burn out, right? You might have a bad day, maybe you didn't get good sleep the night before. And so the way you would normally triage something, even if it's busy work, right? Just things happen, things get overlooked. And I think another dimension to this is that you can consistently guarantee very specific standard operating procedures are executed every single time exactly how it's designed, right? And I don't think that you get a lot of that when you have just humans trying to do step A through Z, right? Every single time over and over and over again.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. Yeah, really, I think teed up the conversation well. So attendees, if or I guess if you're like me, AI agent, or there are lots of like industry buzzwords where you just kind of nod and you have generally a sense of what is, what they are. But then if you were really pushed on it, you might be like, huh, I don't actually know a concise way to understand what an agent is. So Jimmy, maybe for people like me in the audience, could you like define what exactly an AI agent is? And then how is it different from the automation that SOCs have been doing for
Yeah.
the past, decade or so?
Yes. So there are very theoretical definitions for AI agents, but I'm a very pragmatic and practical person. I'm an applied researcher. I love to just kind of say it like it is. So to me, an AI agent is just an intelligent system that can dynamically react to different data that it's presented or questions it's asked and ultimately perform a task on your behalf, right? Like that to me in a nutshell is kind of how I see AI agents. And they can be crazy complicated. Some of our partners and vendors have like really interesting agentic workflows built in, and it's amazing to see all that work. Or it can be just simple as just asking an agent to go query a database and having it come back and giving you, a summary of that or a raw table of that database, right? It really runs the gamut.
And so, okay, yeah, so that's interesting. So it can go do things for you, but as you already talked about, um, SOCs have been automating tasks for years, right? So that was one initial question I had when getting into this research with you was like, okay, automation's been happening. How is this different? So yeah, for the audience, could you talk about how what an AI agent can do is different than
Yeah.
traditional automation?
So remember, these are large language models at the heart of what's powering most AI agents, at least in terms of what we're talking about today. And these LLMs introduce new sort of capabilities we've never seen before, right? And I touched upon this, but I'll go a little bit deeper. They can do things like text sentiment analysis. They can do things like tell you why specific words in a sentence might be, fishy or not fishy. They can do language related tasks that you would have to train classical machine learning models on tons and tons of data. And you can just do that now for pennies on the dollar, right? And because of that, you can ask these models to reason and think and do things like chain of thought through ideas, where in a predefined kind of static workflow, it's if this, then that, then this, then that, whatever. AI agents allow you to sort of plug into those same if then, if this, then that workflows, but they can reason and extract features from data that you could just never do before, right? A really good example of that is like analyzing phishing emails, right? I'll just riff on that for a second. Like imagine a large language model looking at a phishing email, and then you could say, hey, I know this is classified as phishing, but why? And what if it can explain to you down to the sentence the different features of that email and why it's, fishy or not fishy? And we're doing a lot of that today on the identity side too. A really good example of that on the identity side is user baselining, right? One of the hardest tasks to do in an investigation for identity, even cloud, because it is, all API based behind the scenes, is who was the identity that did that, and was it normal, right? We've developed a set of technologies behind the scenes, complemented and layered with AI, that allow us to build these user baselines really quickly and then present a narrative around like, yes, in the last 30 days, Alex has shown a consistent pattern of logging in from these areas, from these devices, from these times of day, right? And so when you take all of that, I can now extract features from there. I can layer that into other tools, and I get this like dynamic kind of automation workflow that you just couldn't do before with these sort of static, if this then that automation tools, right? That we're all used to. And I will say that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so the answer isn't, oh, I know I have AI look and I'm looking for a problem to apply it to. We often will start with a fully autonomous AI agent, and then we'll start poking at it, look at how accurate it can be, look at how well it does in certain scenarios. But then we will actually peel things off of it and make it more deterministic over time. And what we often find is replacing blocks of these sort of, reasoning AI agentic magic with more deterministic code paths. And that's actually been our really good sort of roadmap to how we experiment, prototype a lot of data with autonomous agents. But as you move into production, you quickly realize that these things, you need to keep them on guardrails, right? So I'll kind of pause there because I know that kind of bleeds into some more discussion, but curious what you have there, Alex, on any insights.
Yeah, no, in terms of like, you talked about like the application of this, and one example that you cited to me from that we've detected for customers that we've applied to customer environments is like travel and like false positive related to legitimate travel. So with the user baselining that you described, right, we could see that, hey, okay, user mostly works out of San Antonio, but then they sent an email from New York City, and then they sent an email from London, and then maybe they log in from London via VPN to maybe a little more protected resources. With the baselining, you can capture that transition in a way that you can't with hard-coded if this country or if outside of this geography, then high severity alert, right? So that when you told me about that, I kind of illustrated the combination of agents or the application of agents to baselining to actually notifying customers of threats. You can really reduce noise by using
Yes.
these agents.
Yep. And to your point you just made, it's like it's critical to kind of break those problems into much smaller pieces, and then you can chain them together. And that's really where you start to see the fruits of your labor, where these agents become a lot, quote unquote, smarter. It's not because they're becoming sentient and reasoning and thinking on their own. It's that you've built a path for them to go down and lead them down that gets them to a correct answer most of the time, right?
Yeah. So, and another thing you see certainly on Twitter or X, or maybe I've definitely spent too much time there, but like so many thoughts on or so many assumptions about using AI agents, right? Like if you use an AI agent, well, you're relinquishing full control of decision making to an unreliable agent and narrator, right? It's like some assumptions that AI agents are always autonomous, and some that they're almost undervaluing what an agent can do. So yeah, how should attendees think about the types of AI agents out there in kind of a practical way?
Yeah, it's a good tee up. When we were writing that blog, I immediately was like, you know what? I think a SWOT analysis of just, in my mind, when I break this problem down from a practicality approach, it's like you have fully autonomous agents with all the bells and whistles and whiz bang things, but they're random in nature. And I have yet to see one that is really good at nailing things down every time, deterministically almost. Um, Versus what I would call non-autonomous agents, where you're inserting humans in the loop, on steps of that, and or you're having the output of one agent analysis feed another, feed another, feed another, which ultimately then has a human in the loop. I'm very bullish, as I'm sure you could imagine, on this technology set as a whole. And there's no doubt in my mind that these models are maturing at a rate that we've never seen, sort of technology evolve with all the money kind of pouring into it. These are going to get smarter and smarter and more practical to use, right? Or more fine-tuned for our use cases. But until we get to that point, the pragmatic, practical, right approach to balance safety of using these AI, the accuracy and cost, and not only money but the time. It just seems like the non-autonomous agent is the best choice, at least in our eyes, for the sort of production workloads and scale that we work at. Because we're relying on these, right, to do investigations and ultimately detect threats across our customer base.
Yeah, and I like what with the SWOT analysis, what that illustrated was it just depends on what is the goal, right? So you mentioned brainstorming as a really good as a strength of for engaging with more autonomous agents and AI, right? Like you can give it the same prompt, you're going to get a different output every time, but you're at the stage of a project where almost more is better, and the variability is an asset, right? But
Correct.
yeah, like when looking at Red Canary and kind of you bringing agents into our SOC, it's like we are measuring to the millisecond are the MTTD, MTTR, and
Yep.
various substeps in the whole detection and response chain. And like small degradations get a lot of eyeballs and focus, right? We just
Yeah.
we can't afford to lose time or increase the volume of inconsistent information we're providing customers. So like
Yeah.
autonomous agents, like, well, we can't really afford to do it.
Yeah. And like a really practical example on all of this, I'll like think about an autonomous agent. I prompt an autonomous agent to say, hey, go hunt my identity data and find anomalous logons for Alex, right? So what that thing's going to do is it's going to sit there and plan. It's going to go, all right, in order to do that, what tools do I need to use? What questions do I need to ask? Those are all round trip inference requests to whatever cloud provider you're using for these foundational models, right? That's minutes and minutes and minutes of it thinking, reasoning. Once it comes up with that plan, it then has to go make dozens of additional calls to all of those tools, sometimes chained together, dependent on others. Sometimes they'll fail, right? And so what ends up happening is a really simple question that you could have done by yourself is now taking 15 minutes to answer with an autonomous agent. That's not bad for certain scenarios. Like you said, Alex, I personally like them. We have autonomous agents in our dev where it's unbelievable for brainstorming. I think in the hands of a more powerful, sophisticated user that's like an expert in whatever domain they're using the agent in, autonomous agents are really powerful. But for like general use, the non-autonomous agents blow them away because we need that predictability. We have lots of functional tests internally that when I go down this agent path, we know for a fact it's always going to return these values every single time, right? And we've tuned things down to that level.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jimmy. I look in the chat and I see someone mention like use the word tame, and that's exactly like taming agents is exactly the language we kept using as we were kind of building this
Yeah.
out, right? It's the power of these things is kind of undeniable, but if it's not tamed, like letting an
Yeah.
autonomous agent go wild for a rigorously measured process, like you're going to have
Yeah.
problems.
I always like joke like, would you let the super book smart intern loose on like your entire, production code base, or like would you keep them kind of constrained and keep that excitement targeted, right? Like that's really what these agents are. They're that sort of book smart new employee that might not have a lot of that practical hands-on experience.
Awesome. Well, I think we have plenty of questions, but we have room for some more. So I'd say if you have a question, keep piping them in. Maybe just before I start going to the chat and questions, Jimmy, I just want to get your take. Can the process of using AI agents in your SOC work without humans?
Yes and no. I think it depends on the ask. I
Okay.
think for non-critical tasks. So for example, let's say I have certain blogs that I follow for, threat intelligence feeds, insights, actionable things that I know I could, once someone publishes something, oh yeah, these are usually good. I need to get that ingested into my systems. Like, yeah, using autonomous AI agents to go scrape blogs and build IOC lists and summarize, trending threats and giving that to your Intel team or your SOC analysts to then go make changes. Like, yeah, that to me is a great use case, low risk, autonomous agent kind of thing, right? But when it comes to like, threat, not a threat, like classification problems, I would not let autonomous agents do classification style problems just yet. They're not meant to be a classifier in general, although we've seen some really good approaches in prompting and how you give them access to like different machine learning feature weights and things like that to have them classify, but it's still all it takes is like a foundational model to change a little bit and everything that you had tested is now broken, right? So it's definitely, it depends.
All right, I'll now start moving to the chat, and we have plenty of time. So again, please keep the questions coming. But first question is how should organizations approach protecting customer data when working with AI models?
Yeah. This is a really good question. It's typically at the top of mind of most folks taking a step into this, and maybe they're a little scared. There's a lot of just like misunderstood concepts about data safety and using these models. So, first off, like don't use any of the public chat bots and things to ever put proprietary data in. I would not trust if that's being used for training and things. The key is you need to use sort of the foundational models provided by the big cloud providers, right? We use a combination of AWS and Azure models, right, for our backend foundational models that power our agents. Both of the providers provide data sovereignty guarantees. They provide things like your data never mixes with anybody else's data, and they provide that they never store. And in cases that they do, we opt out of some of the like safety training kind of things, the guardrails that some of these vendors have to put on the models. And so I kind of phrase it as like you upload customer data S3 buckets, right, or blob storage in the cloud, and it just sits there, right? Um, AI models really are no different. Like you're performing inference in memory on some node, K8's node somewhere, and getting those tokens back, right? And so as long as you're trusting those guarantees by your cloud providers, like that's a big part. So that's the inference side of it. And then in terms of like the retrieval augmented generation or how you're augmenting that model's general knowledge with like your own company data, the same, you know, um, data security posture, data management, row level security, whatever that is on your data lakes or vector databases, whether you have a web app doing it or whether you have an AI agent that's calling the same interface to query the data, like it's all the same. And so you would still use your typical security controls around, data segmentation, data sanitization, checking to make sure before things go out that it doesn't contain certain keywords and whatnot. Like none of that changes. It's just the medium at which we're sending that data is just different, right?
Yeah. So Nick, another question, I think we kind of touched on this, but the question is, what types of tasks specifically do you find greater value added by applying AI agents?
I think data retrieval. It's so good right now at data retrieval. And then like you can describe a table, right? And then it knows that, and then it will just go off and craft queries dynamically and pull data in, right? Or using like vector databases and doing like cosine similarity. When you say, hey, I have this security event, can you give me other ones that are similar to it, right? Um, to me, I think the biggest added value is the data retrieval. I would then back that up to say a very close second is one thing that we found early on was, you know, in cybersecurity, threats are rare, despite what you see in marketing materials and all the things, even Red Canary will tell you with trending threats, right? They are rare, right? Just like in the medical practice. But you get overwhelmed by non-threatening security events, right? False positives. But our customers ask a lot from us and they say, hey, I know you guys are great at what you do, but why did you say this event is not malicious? Like when I'm looking at it, it looks very malicious. And so what we've found actually is we see a lot of value in describing threats, right? We've been really good at that. But the AI, sort of these agents that we've built allow us to now go a level deeper and explain our investigation process in a really easy consumable form, bite-sized chunks, right? And like, hey, yeah, we investigated this alert. Here's all the data that we looked at and found around it, and here are the reasons why we decided that this is a non-threatening event. And so it's the data retrieval, and I think that natural language explanation of complicated security concepts, and then that dovetails into like you're training people on the job. If the AI is helping to explain, you know, security events and it enriched this thing and did this other thing and did an anomaly, you know, look up and saw that it was a rare, you know, user agent or something, you know, your junior SOC analyst is like, oh, I would have never thought of asking that question, file that away, right? And so you're kind of getting training through osmosis of using this stuff too. So yeah, I keyed on a few, I guess.
No, that's super helpful. And actually, I think your response ties to a comment in the chat that I think is relevant. So, Michael, to summarize, I guess Michael's point is, do you think the use of these agents will go upstream to the vendors doing detection and basically reduce, you know, right now, false
Yeah,
positives
Mike.
are a huge problem with security products, right? Like, will this not lead to higher fidelity and more accurate security products? I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, Michael, I think you're spot on with that question and like your sentiment on there. Um, you know, having worked at Carbon Black for so long and helped a lot with their endpoint stuff, I'll borrow from them. But you know, despite what like from a security practitioner, you love like only high frequency or low frequency true positives, like very high fidelity true positives. If you sell a security product like that never spits out alerts, even if they're false positives, everybody gets this perception of like, why am I buying this thing? It's too quiet. I would expect for it to be louder. And I don't think this is something specific to the cybersecurity industry in general. I think that's sort of like any kind of SaaS product that you're buying. Like I want it to spit stuff out at me every once in a while to feel like I'm getting value out of it, right? And unfortunately, I think on the security side, a lot of the alerts and things that you get are kind of to make sure that they're inadvertently showing their value. Now, how that's perceived on the person who's buying it and using it, that's a different story, right? But having sat in that seat and had a lot of those conversations, at least at Carbon Black, like that is some of the mindset that goes into it. Um, I still, a lot of these big mega vendors, they're never going to have perfect detections because they need to build security heuristics for tens to hundreds of millions of identities, computers, you know, cloud workloads, whatever they are. And no matter how good this technology gets, I still think we're really far away from a world where like every signal you get out of your product is just like, you know, really high signal and you never have to worry about false positives. Michael, I don't think you're saying that, but and you're right. Like I do think vendors that embrace this stuff, embedding it into their platforms natively, they're inevitably going to get better sort of feedback and higher quality to improve those alerts. But I still think that there will still be a pretty high ratio of signal to noise in any security product you buy for this foreseeable future.
Yeah, and we agree, Jimmy, and we've talked about that not just even the need to show value by like sending something, but you just, I mean, if you're making pure SaaS security products, you don't want customers coming back and saying, yeah, you have high fidelity threats that you do send me, but you missed these things, right? Like missing something is just you're totally disincentivized from missing anything. So shipping or sending alerts earlier with less context and generally higher volume is just kind of incentivized by the dynamic, right? So it's another way of saying
Yeah.
what you said, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Um, let's go back to the question. So one question, how is the future SOC and cybersecurity going to look with AI? So defensively and offensively. Jimmy, small question for you. You got to answer
Yeah.
it. You're
That is a that
the
is like the like prophetic question that these are the fun ones, I guess. That's why we're here, right? Um, it's going to be completely different than what a SOC and what we do in offensive and defensive operations is going to be completely upended over the next 3 to 5 years. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And what I mean by that is that um, the jobs that which people do in the SOC will change. I don't think jobs are going to like go away or be taken away. I just think the roles that humans are going to play are going to be much more around critical thinking, problem solving, those like type two thinking, mindsets that humans have that just machines will take a long time to get to. And so I would hope and envision a lot of the busy work, however you want to define that, can be handled by these workflows that are powered by agents behind the scenes, and they will mature very rapidly, right? They'll get to know your environment. They'll get to know that Jimmy travels, to Denver once a month, right? Like they're going to know these things and it'll just become part of like the security tooling that we use. I think in the offensive side, there will also be a lot of disruption. Your classical pen testing and things like that. Like that is all, it is all being automated now. And I think a lot of that like non-critical red teaming work, enumeration, environment instantiation around what to target, not target, um, you know, what are the outcomes we're trying to fulfill as part of this red team op? What targets should we not touch or show an effect on, right? Like all of that, you're going to have like AI planners at first, and then slowly those AI planners will kind of turn into agents in different places, depending on the criticality of the thing that's asked. But I could even see further out that you almost have like every company has like their own brain in a box, like their own large language model-y thing with all of their data. And then you have these kind of like bigger systems like talking to each other, right? Like, hey, here's my enterprise brain in a box for all of my cybersecurity stuff. And then here's the Red Canary like agent thing that can interface with that. And you could imagine that the two of these systems would work together to almost in real time, triage stuff, kind of working hand in hand with each other. I don't think that that is not a bridge too far in the future at the pace that we're seeing this stuff accelerate.
reality is sci-fi. I love it.
Yeah,
I will
exactly.
say
Yeah.
that, Jimmy, curious what you think. Uh, I see the phrase the autonomous sock
Yeah.
it's in parlance. My perspective, that feels like vendor speak and not, I mean, a fully autonomous sock seems uh, very, very, very far out if it's ever going to happen. Do you see it differently, or what are your thoughts on that phrase, the autonomous sock?
I don't want Skynet running my sock, right? Like I don't want that. I even if it was cool and the data backed it up and it was great, I just wouldn't trust it. I don't know. I have too tight of a tinfoil hat. Like these things can go down. I think one of the things that we don't talk about, right, is the reliability of these models. And a lot of companies are ingraining these things deeply into their SaaS platforms. And what happens when there's an outage in AWS or happens when there's an outage in Azure, right? Like the things actually fail gracefully, right? Like what did the thing that was supposed to be investigated not be investigated? Well, that thing's gone. Like these are really hard problems that we think a lot about behind the scenes and are working really hard to build robust sort of SOC services to provide these outcomes, right? And so um, an autonomous SOC sounds great. I will put my red team hat on and think like, I guarantee you there's certain things you could do to that SOC to make it seem like everything is great, right? And because it's so automated, it's automating away the things that it shouldn't be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think, and I mean, obviously the technology is progressing super quickly, but just looking at what we've learned in 2+ years, like, yeah, the more critical something is and the more complex the reasoning required, the more you need a human in the loop, at least at this point.
Yeah. Yep.
So, okay. Question from, and that was, thanks, Sandeep and Garcia for those questions. From Andrew, uh, specific to the baselining that we talked about, user baselining, is the LLM doing the baseline gathering, like generating the SQL, for example, querying the database, or should the human aggregating the baseline data for the LLM to kind of grok it?
Yes, Andrew. That is a fantastic question. And I would answer, what do you want it to do? Right? When we started out with this, it was fully autonomous, and we had the LLMs generating the queries. We had the LLMs querying the data with the LLMs, you know, with lots of, angry prompting, trying to slice through the data, right? And we learned so much through that. And so if this is a project you were thinking about doing, I would almost recommend trying to go the autonomous route because you're going to learn all these trials and tribulations and sort of taming of the LLM as part of that. But Andrew, I will share with you to jumpstart your idea. It's not the best use of your time or the LLM's time to have it go think about the things that are deterministic. Like, cool, if I need to go query identity data in my org, I always go hit DB ABC123. Yep. And I know the tables are always going to be populated like this. So why do I need to waste round trip calls, time, and money having the LLM try to spit out a query that's right 90% of the time when I can just tell it, go use this tool to go query the data and have it come back, and it will happen 100% of the time exactly like you want it. And so, Andrew, I think this is a great example to nerd out a little bit on kind of the trade-offs between autonomous and non-autonomous agents and how when you have a hammer and everything looks like a nail, you don't always need to hammer every nail in, right? Like, and so you need to pick and choose and learn kind of along the way on like LLMs are really good at some stuff and they're really bad at other things. And sometimes just good old fashioned code is really good, right? And regex and things. And so good question. And I would just say like experiment with both and see if you come to the same conclusions we have.
Awesome. And yeah, to David, to your chat question, do we have a demo to show the AI agent workflow? Right now, we don't. That could be something. I mean, I'm sure Jimmy would push for it. We could try to make it
Yeah.
happen. Right. But basically, our overarching approach right now in our SOC is to use the agents, I would say in the background. I'm not sure if that's the right way to put it, but basically have the agents do work almost outside of the frame of reference of our SOC analysts, such that they do their work and then present the finished product to our SOC analysts as they're working an incident, right? So it's not, if you think about if you're a customer of Red Canary's service, I don't know, when I buy a service, I want the thing as polished as possible when it comes to me, right? So we don't necessarily want our customers seeing in the user interface all the work that's happening. We want them to consume a high fidelity finished product of whatever we're working on. So that's right now why we don't have like a demo on the internet of how our agents work. But yeah, something to consider, Jimmy. We could think about it.
Yeah, and I would also say, David, like, yo, of course you talk all about this stuff, but you don't have a demo. Like, awesome vendor, Red Canary, right? And I would just back that up and just say, there is so much customer data, right, that's part of these workflows and stuff. It's really hard to build that generic story, sanitize all of that data and make it repeatable for anyone to kind of look at, right? We're still in early stages right now. I don't care who's working with this stuff. And so for those reasons, you could absolutely, pick up the phone and say, hey, can you give me a Red Canary demo? And we can show you, not like from a public view, but more of like a private view, some of that information and show you how it all works. And we've kind of given you bite-sized chunks on several of the blogs that myself and a few of my colleagues have posted. And so you can kind of see how that is manifesting. We actually had a blog go out today around some anomaly detection that we've been working on that our AI agents then go investigate. And you'll see examples of like what the AI agents output as part of that analysis. So right now we're trying to feed you like the bite-sized like output chunks. It's really hard to like demo, here's an agent workflow and like things are lighting up as it's kind of going through. We have that internally on demo systems, but that's, you know, it's not appropriate to really like show as part of a more like Alex was saying, like a polished product presentation.
Yeah, to follow up, so Will's question, any plans for Red Canary to have a Gen AI agent that customers will be able to chat with to assist with investigations? I can speak to that. Our roadmap is kind of always evolving, right? Always subject to change. Right now, we are not planning a chat interface. To the point I made earlier that like we want to be doing as much work as possible for our customers, right? So when they come to our platform, it's like as much work as possible has been done, so they have as little work as possible to do, right? And sometimes with the chat, the chat interface, it's like kind of, I don't know, there's for sure value, but it's almost like the customer is doing work in the interface.
Yep.
What we do have, and Jimmy can maybe speak to this too, is we already have the ability, kind of one-click assistance, right? So if you're, let's say you've sent an alert to Red Canary, you want to understand kind of why Red Canary made a designation the way that they did, you can, with one click, have an AI summary based on the work that we've done on what happened, what's this alert actually saying in plain speak, what are some insights that we can pull out from this alert, and what are some recommended response and remediation steps if you want to perform some on your own. So Jimmy, I'm curious if you describe it any differently.
No, yeah. Today we have a lot of customer facing AI enabled features, whether it's we publish a threat and here's how you can remediate every step of that threat. A lot of that is AI powered behind the scenes with agents. To what Alex said, you can send us, I'll pick on Microsoft Entra Identity Protection Alert. You can send us those alerts. Our AI agents slice through those really well all day and do a really good job of finding signal in the noise. And you'll get a full analysis. You'll get all kinds of enrichment. You'll get all kinds of prevalence information outside of what Microsoft's providing. And you're going to get that all in like a nice narrative right there on our platform. And I will, as a security practitioner at heart, I have a couple strong opinions about chatbots, especially in the context of cybersecurity products. Anytime I see an open chat box on a cybersecurity product, there's some GPU somewhere in a data center weeping. It's wasting cycles on lots of things that it doesn't need to, right? And B, it's a security nightmare that you have to do so much validation and guardrailing that you can't do, prompt injections or jailbreaking of these things and having it get access to things it shouldn't. And so I don't think the technology is mature enough from our perspective, from a resourcing perspective, for us to confidently put something out there, right? We have our SOC analysts today internally have chat agents. They have fully autonomous agents that investigate things. They can chat with it. They have all of that internally. And we're just trying to figure out the best way that should manifest to our customers. In my experience, you need to be an expert right now to chat and get the most out of these security focused chatbots. What if we just took it a step further and just did a lot of that expertise for you and kind of just had it all teed up and you can either click buttons to invoke it or it just happens on its own? Like that's really the direction that we're striving.
Okay, let's keep it going. Yeah, thanks for that question, Will. From Nebosa, yeah, just kind of reiterating how big of a problem alert fatigue is, and do we have any detection and response tool that generates high quality alerts? So I can touch on that briefly. So yeah, I'm not sure. So Red Canary both applies proprietary detection technology. So we kind of are a detection tool, and we integrate with leading threat detection tools like your EDR providers, your SIM vendor, identity products, right? So among other things, kind of what we do is we take all this information, like detections we're doing, detections your products are doing, use things like AI agents and automation and our human experts to very efficiently sift through the noise and only provide our customers the high fidelity threat notifications, right? So that's, if you're not familiar with Red Canary, that's like 101 or 001 of what we do. So yeah, I think we'd say like there are a lot of really good security products, but they're obviously not perfect for the reasons we described. So the combination of the products you need plus a service with its own kind of detection capabilities in what we do, kind of sift through the noise to get you the high fidelity detections.
Yeah, well put.
Um, Let's see, from David, should we package everything into an agent? Can be as simple as a prompt, or is it only worthwhile to put complex workflows into agents? Jimmy,
Yeah,
what?
David. Now you're talking about like agent architectures and like just software engineering design, right? I don't, there's no right or wrong answer here, David. You could, it depends on your workflows. I have found that decoupling and trying to pack everything in one complex agent turns into a nightmare trying to debug at scale, right? And so the more transparency and verbosity, and maybe like inspection points that you implement, as part of whatever the thing is you're automating, the better in my eyes. In that blog that went out, we kind of talked about um, like this easy to hard sort of frameworks. David, I would go experiment with OpenAI function calling and start from there. That is at the heart of like agentic workflows where you can prompt, an LLM to do a task and it can smartly figure out which tool it needs to execute and then it can bring that data back. That sort of primitive is at the core of all agentic workflows is it's this function calling tool use that is it. And so really focusing on that, play around with it. There's lots of great playgrounds and examples out on the internet to play with. And then kind of you'll see it'll kind of click when you're like, oh, that was a really complicated way of just saying I prompt it this way and it spits stuff out this way, right? Like you'll start to kind of see the magic happen.
Love it. Okay, so yeah, I think Jimmy, are you able to go a little bit? We're a little bit over, but I feel
Yeah,
like we got some great
100%.
questions. You can keep going.
Yeah.
Okay. So Elaine, to your question, yeah, maybe I'll put the guardrails on Jimmy to not talk about the various AI, how the various EDR companies, like do a comparison. But I guess Jimmy, are you seeing any interesting like AI enabled EDR use cases out there?
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. So I would just say in general, all of the big vendors are doing great investments in these areas. And every one of them is sort of latched onto one common use case. And it's like up leveling whoever's using that product to make it easier to run queries or to squeeze more juice out of that investment. And so you see lots of these sort of AI enabled, XDR platforms, um, that those integrations are really around like their query engines and these sort of chat bots that allow you to query and have natural conversations with your data. I think that's a great place to start because everybody's so used to these chat completion models in that chat GPT world that it just makes sense to kind of naturally to bring that in as your first sort of interface into AI. And so they're all doing in my eyes, like a decent job at bringing this in. And then you're starting to see some of the vendors like start to do investigations of their own products. They're starting to do summaries of investigations, suggesting response and remediation actions, suggesting hardening advice, based on what it's observing in the network. And so I don't think anyone's like a shining star, including ourselves. I think we all have a different approach that fits the sort of strengths of that whatever that product is, right? And so I would just challenge all of you to like don't read what's on the website. Like if you are interested in those products, like go out and ask for access to them and start, banging on them and using them. Because that's really the only way that you're going to find that those tools work well for your team.
Terrific. All right, I think we got through all the questions. So Jimmy, thanks a lot for the time. This was super fun. Obviously, our conversation keeps going. I'm sure we'll be back in not too long with kind of another Q&A for everyone to participate in. But yeah, most of all, thanks everyone for taking the time today. Really appreciate it. We know everyone in security, IT is very busy, and you just took 50 minutes out of your day, which we're very grateful for. We hope it was valuable to you. I'll say I can volunteer Jimmy here. If you have follow-up questions, just connect with Jimmy on LinkedIn, or
Yeah,
ping him a question. Like he can talk with about this stuff all day. So just love to
yeah,
build the community. But yeah, with that, again, thanks everyone, and have a great rest of the week.
yeah. Thank you for your time, everybody. It's much appreciated.